He was a tech industry billionaire and the biggest defense contractor in the world. He was the king of Las Vegas and Nevada. A legendary playboy who dated the most famous stars of his time. You think I'm talking about Mr. House? Nope, I'm talking about this guy. Welcome everybody, my name is Lida Liberopoulou and in this video I'm going to talk about Mr. House and the man who inspired his character, Howard Hughes. Let's do this. Mr. House is one of the three main factions in the game. Well, four if you consider Yes Man a faction.
Hi there!
But he's very different from the other two. On the path towards the New Vegas Strip, the Legion and NCR are almost everywhere you look. You see their outposts, their patrols, and even evidence of their war crimes.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates. It's useful that you happen by.
Yep, had to be done. However, besides a few early mentions of his name, Mr. House is absent from the Mojave. No outposts, no soldiers, nothing. But from the moment you get to the strip, you start to realize that he not only knows almost everything that's going on in the game, but that he has been controlling your path through Victor from the beginning. If you think about it, House has set the stage for almost all events in New Vegas. He is even responsible for the existence of New Vegas itself. When it comes to the game story, he's probably the most important character after the player. And one of the most interesting things about him is that he's based on a real-world person, Howard Robert Hughes Jr., one of the richest and most influential people of the 20th century. And like Edward Shallow, the Legion Caesar, he has many similarities with his real-world counterpart. Let's begin with the most obvious ones. First of all, his looks. This pre-war image of House you see on the screen every time he talks to you is clearly based on Hughes, more specifically as he was in the early 1950s. I knew Howard Hughes' story before I played the game, so this image made the connection immediately for me. And when you first talk to him, he will introduce himself like this.
I am Robert Edwin House, President, CEO, and sole proprietor of the New Vegas Strip. I oversaw the city's renovations starting from 2274 onward. The three families are my employees. Before the Great War of 2077, I was the founder, president, and CEO of Robco Industries, a vast computer and robotics corporation.
If you ever played any other Fallout game, you should know the name Robco because some of the more familiar technologies in the series are connected to it in some way. The computer terminals and their operating system, the Pip-Boy, the Sentry bots, the Assaultron,
A girl doesn't like to be kept waiting.
the Protectron,
Please assume the position.
even Liberty Prime.
Red Chinese infiltration unit. Eliminated.
He also owned the Repcon and Abraxodyne Chemical. House had massive defense contracts with the US government and collaborated with some of the most gigantic corporations in the Fallout universe. Well, guess what? Good old Howard had also interest in multiple industries, from movie studios like RKO to airlines like TWA, and from aerospace research to real estate. He's best known for creating the Silver Bullet and the H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, which is the largest flying boat ever constructed. They made the AIM-4 Falcon missiles, the OH-6 Cayuse helicopter, the first lunar surveyors, the SYNCOM satellites, even the laser technologies used in precision cutting and DVDs. House also appears to be very hands-on with the products of his industry. The Platinum chip, which is the key to New Vegas, is not just something made by his company, it's something he personally designed, and he makes it very clear to you.
I spent 2 centuries searching for the platinum chip. It's my invention, my property, mine! Now be a good courier and deliver it!
Also, the first time I had this interaction, it made me realize another subtle similarity with Howard Hughes. Hughes was a very private and reclusive person. As he became older, he avoided face-to-face contact even with his closest associates. Even Robert Mayhew, the guy who was Hughes' second hand for almost 13 years, never actually met him and only talked to him through letters and the telephone. In the game, you only get to see House if you kill him, otherwise all interactions with him are done through screens and his Securitrons. Obviously, there's an in-game reason for this, but it's still an interesting little detail. When you hand over the platinum chip to Mr. House, he will take time to personally demonstrate and explain to you how it improves the Securitron systems. In fact, he seems very familiar with every aspect of the technologies developed by his company.
The titanium alloy housing that protects its electronic core deflects small arms and shrapnel easily enough. Its X-25 Gatling laser, produced to spec by Glassinghouse Inc., is deadly against soft targets at medium range. And for close-range suppression or crowd control, the Securitron is armed with a 9mm submachine gun. The M235 missile launcher gives the Securitron the ability to engage ground and air targets at significantly longer ranges. And a rapid-fire G28 grenade launcher ensures the Securitron is deadly in close-range engagements.
And this is exactly what Howard Hughes did with his businesses. His need for control and attention to detail was legendary to the point where it became a problem for him and his projects. He also loved flying and flew almost every plane his company ever made. Actually, he flew every plane he could get his hands on. He broke some very big world records and had some very serious accidents. There are countless anecdotes about his obsession with overseeing every project and business deal, but my favorite is probably this one by George Marrett, who used to be a test pilot for the Hughes Aircraft Company. The French company Sud Aviation was interested in selling to TWA an SC-210 Caravelle, one of the first jet airliners, so they brought one to Hughes Airport together with an entire team of engineers and pilots. They showed the plane to Hughes, and at the end of the tour, he stayed in the cockpit and asked the entire entourage to leave the plane because he wanted to think about it for a bit. Once they were off the plane, he locked the door and started the engines. Then he taxied to the runway and took off without informing the air traffic control or anyone else. His associates were used to seeing him testing airplanes above the airport, so they expected him to come back after a while. But the hours went on and Hughes and the Caravelle were nowhere to be seen. Also, the air traffic controls of the other airports in the area had no idea where he was. In the end, the plane was found after a week in Palm Springs, over 200 kilometers away. Hughes simply landed and left it there. Keep in mind that Hughes was not trained in the controls of this plane and didn't even know how much fuel was in its tanks, but he just flew it and left it there like it was an e-scooter. And here we're starting to get to the more eccentric aspects of House and Hughes, and there are plenty of those in the game. When you first enter the Lucky 38 penthouse, you get to meet Jane, a Securitron with the image of a brunette on its screen.
Sugar, I may be a robot on the outside, but on the inside, my neurocomputational matrix is an exact copy of Mr. House's favorite girl.
That's creepy.
Mr. House has a lot of needs.
Oh my
Sugar.
God, ew!
I take care of all of them.
I did not want to know that.
Kiss and tell.
Also, if you talk to Raoul the Ghoul later in the game, he will mention this.
I remember there were some weird stories about him, especially near the end. There was a tell-all in El Periódico de las Aburridas by a Starlet house data. She said they never, don't make me spell it out, boss. Anyway, she said all he wanted to do was scan her brain and make her dress up in different outfits.
These hints to House's personal life are clearly influenced by the notorious private life of Howard Hughes. When he was working as a film director and producer in Hollywood, he had multiple affairs with several famous stars like Katharine Hepburn, Ginger Rogers, Bette Davis, Ava Gardner, and many, many more. And a lot of these affairs happened while he was still married. The Jane Securitron is of course a reference to the actress Jane Russell, but the interesting thing here is that She was one of the few actresses of the time he did not date. He directed her in the movie Outlaw, but they kept their interactions strictly at the professional level. He famously designed a special bra for her so that her assets could be enhanced in the movie. Why am I doing this? Russell never actually wore it and just hit the outline of her regular brow with tissues. The result was still impressive enough to ban the outlaw in several US states. One judge even said that Russell's breasts hung like a thunderstorm over a summer landscape. A core aspect of How's character and of the entire game, if you think about it, is his fixation with controlling and shaping the future of New Vegas. From the beginning, he makes it very clear that everything you see on the Strip belongs to him. This mirrors Howard Hughes' famous expansion into Las Vegas and Nevada in the mid-1960s. Hughes moved to Vegas in 1966 and stayed in the penthouse at the Desert Inn. Eventually, he bought the entire hotel for $13 million. By 1969, he had 6 out of the 13 casinos on the Strip, Alamo Airways, dozens of acres of land on the Strip, a local CBS TV station where he even controlled the station's program, and the McCarran International Airport. Yes, the McCarran International Airport used to belong to Hughes. He even planned to connect it to the monorail that's running through the Vegas Strip. In the game, the monorail is connected to McCarran, which is something that still hasn't happened in the real world. Before the war, outside of the Vegas Strip, House owned the Repcon facilities you see while traveling towards Vegas, but he also owned NCR's Camp Golf, which was originally named the House Resort and Country Club. Inside you can even find a portrait of him standing in front of what looks like Liberty Prime. This is clearly inspired by a famous real-world photo of Howard Hughes standing in front of a Boeing 100A. And the choice to make the Hughes Resort a golf course is not random. Howard Hughes played golf since he was 9 years old, and he continued to play at a very advanced level until his many injuries from his plane accidents made it impossible to continue. There's also a small challenge included in the Gunrunner DLC called A Slave Obeys that requires you to kill House with a golf club. This is of course a reference to the murder by the player of Andrew Ryan in BioShock. Andrew Ryan is also inspired by Howard Hughes, so makes sense. Also, if you decide to kill House, you will find him sealed in a sterilized cryonic preservation chamber, which is probably a reference to Howard Hughes' obsessive fear of germs. If you open it, you'll face his emaciated 261-year-old body. This image is pretty close to the autopsy report on Howard Hughes' body. When he died, he weighed 41 kilograms or 90 pounds and showed signs of severe neglect. He also had 5 or 6 broken hypodermic needles under his skin. This is another well-known fact about Howard Hughes. From an early age, he showed symptoms of OCD, which gradually became worse as he aged. Also, his many injuries from his accidents made him addicted to codeine and Valium. By the end of his life, he had been completely isolated with only his care assistants directly communicating with him. There are some very well-known stories about this bizarre behavior at the later stage of his life. One of these stories is, in fact, referenced in the Old World Blues DLC.
Worry about House? Why would I do this? Hope he died alone in a dingy room, streaming his last remaining bodily fluids into jars.
This is based on the rather disturbing story about him keeping his urine in mason jars. Although this is mentioned in at least 2 biographies of Hughes, like many other stories about his later life, it's difficult to know if it's actually true. Mr. House is eccentric and reclusive, but he doesn't really mirror Hughes' insanity. And it's a bit weird not to adopt this specific trait when the game uses so many other parts of his character for House. But here's the thing, Crazy House is in the game. Well, kinda. The full-on New Vegas Collector's Edition official game guide mentions that Mr. House had an elder half-brother called Anthony. This half-brother cheated him of his inheritance, the H&H Tools Company, after his father was killed. The guide also says that while Robert House managed to thrive after creating Robco, Anthony became increasingly paranoid, seeking to guard himself against the vengeance that never came and inflicting all manner of strange HR rules on his workforce. The H&H Tools Company is of course a reference to the Hughes Tool Company. Even its sign is inspired by the Hughes Tool Company sign. Howard was an only child and inherited the Hughes Tool Company at the age of 19 after his father's death. Originally, he had to share ownership with other relatives, but he managed to declare himself a legal adult and take full control of his father's company. The company also became the main source of funding for all his other projects. You can find H&H Tools Company in the game. The entries on the company's terminals show Anthony House increasing paranoia through the extremely detailed and odd instructions and rules he forced his employees to follow. This is something that Howard Hughes also did to his employees and associates. The emails also mention that employees were required to avoid making eye contact with Anthony House, which is again something that Howard Hughes demanded from his staff. Also, Anthony stopped getting haircuts and trims, which mirrors Howard Hughes' later years when he reportedly let his beard grow to his waist and his hair to mid-back. The staff of his company also did some very unusual activities in their spare time. The accordion and the riding crop, the stovepipe and the souvenir moon rocks, the rubber sheets and the souvenir elephant foot trash can. What the f***? I must make a short note here. This looks very much like the running joke in the British sitcom Allo Allo, where Yvette the waitress used to entertain Colonel Strom with the use of a flying helmet, an egg whisk, and a stick of wet celery. By the way, if this is ever confirmed to be an actual reference to Allo Allo, I'm going to lose my mind. Moving on. Beyond the disturbing last entry, you'll never learn what actually happened to Anthony House. There is some cut content related to him, but even that doesn't give any real answers. When I first learned about Anthony House, I hoped that the game had a twist where it was revealed that Robert House had a split personality and he was Anthony all along. That would be hilarious, but I'm glad that they left Hughes' insanity out of Robert. I must also mention here that House happens to be my favorite New Vegas character, and the credit for this goes to both the excellent writing and the amazing voice acting by the great late Renée Bergenois. I mean, who can forget this line?
I prefer the term autocrat. I would rule as a chief executive. I would not answer to a board of directors or any other entity. Nothing to impede progress. If you want to see the fate of democracies, look out the windows.
I have always wondered what would be the future of Fallout if Mr. House managed to survive and continue his work. I would love to see this scenario explored in some other part of the franchise, but let's face it, I don't think this is gonna happen anytime soon. I might do another video on New Vegas, more specifically on its connection with the golden age of Las Vegas. But right now I need to focus a bit more on my history game, so I might do a devlog on that. If you want to see more of these videos, please subscribe and ave atque vale.